Welcome back to our series, guys. So in this video, we're going to be taking the bottom off of this boat here and showing you what condition that wood is in. You may also notice this boat sitting beside our project boat. Kind of an interesting story with this one. Now, believe it or not, this boat is very similar to this one, for the simple fact that we got this boat for free. This was actually driven to us all the ways from New York, all the ways up here to Canada, completely free of charge. So we had a gentleman call us from Buffalo, New York about this boat. This is a 1957 Shepherd. And the reason the gentleman drove all the ways from New York, all the ways up to Canada, is for the sole purpose of us restoring this boat. Now that was his only condition. We take the boat and we do a restoration on it. So once we begin the restoration on this boat, we're going to be doing a classic complete restoration similar to the Cobra and similar to this Chris Craft up here. And by saying that, we're going to be doing every piece of trim, every nut, every bolt back to the way that this boat was originally. Now, I did put the windshield from the other boat on here, just kind of a joke, to get a look at it. It does look pretty good on there. Again, we're not going to be putting this on because we're restoring this back to the way it was, but this goes to show you guys that using parts that you have available, they're not always going to be perfect, but with a little bit of manipulation, you can get them back to working. So you can have a boat and have some fun with it. That's more for this type of boat. Something you're just trying to get on the water and enjoy. Right, Artem? Yeah. But for this one, we're going to get the actual glass for it. We're going to get all of the upholstery done up real nice. And cool fact about this boat, it's actually an outboard motor on this one. So there is no massive engine tucked away somewhere. It's just a little bolt-on engine motor. So we can put something pretty massive on the back of this, put a lot of power through this boat. But enough about the Shepherd. You are here to see us pull the panels off of this boat today. So just to recap what we're going to do today, we're going to take these Forstner bits. I don't know how you say that. Forstner. Yeah, that sounds right. You're going to take these Forstner bits and you're going to find the plug. That's a nail head. You're going to find the plug in the wood once this is all scraped and sanded. And we're going to put this down in there and spin it around, and it's going to take all of the plug out of the hole, and then we can back the screw out. So we have to do that to the entire length of this boat. Now, it's not exactly skilled per se work that we have to do, because again, we're just removing these pieces of wood. We're not really concerned about the condition they're in. We want to do our best to maintain a good condition so that we can keep the edges for marking out the new plywood, but really it's not super necessary. We can just use this side of the boat to mark out the size of the plywood as well. But it is tedious. This is very tedious work. So we're going to set up a camera and I'm going to do a little bit of time lapse, a little bit of talking, and I'll show you guys exactly what we're working with. Once we get up to this area, it is plywood, so that might be a little bit different than the rest of it, but I believe, let's take a quick look here. I will be using a drill, I promise. Yeah, so there's going to be plugs along the plywood section as well. Once all the wood and the plywood is off, and we get access to the bottom of the framing on this boat, we can begin cleaning it up and getting it prepped for the plywood that we're going to be putting down next. So when we do adhere the plywood to this and we put in our 5200, it's going to seal properly and we're not going to have any issues going down the road. So first of all, we're going to grab a scraper. We thankfully have quite a few selections of them. This is the one that I'm going to use just to get some of that silicone mostly off of the boat. And then we can begin taking our scraper and going to town on these planks, getting as much of this silicone off as possible. Now, on your boat, if you are working on a boat, following along at home, you're probably not going to have silicone on the outside of the wood. I really hope you don't. This is kind of a bizarre situation where someone in the past has put the silicone on the outside. Typically what you want to do is you want this to be very clean in here and you want to pump it in and try to get as much as you can into the slots here. The best way to do it, quite honestly, is to flip the boat over, but if you don't have access to that, it can be a little bit tricky. We have done it in the past where we do it with the boat sitting the right way around to adhere the silicone, so it is possible, but if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to get out a scraper to remove some silicone, it's not the best. It is tedious, and it's not how these boats should be done. And to show you, actually, I'm going to show you quickly on the Shepherd what it looks like on the bottom. So this is what a typical boat that has been sitting in a field or hasn't been in the water for some time is going to look like. It's going to have expansion on the wood planking here. So you see there's a bit of a gap. Now again, these boats are designed to sit in water until this gap begins to squeeze back together and seal itself. So it is always possible that these can soak up some water over time and seal up some of the cracks and stop the water from coming in. But that's what the bottom on most of these boats should look like. A little bit of gaps, a little bit of cracking, and that's essentially it. Even this cracking here, in theory, sitting long enough in water, would expand and slowly disappear. In theory, I'm not sure about this particular boat, but for some cases that can be true. So don't be intimidated if you get underneath these and you see, oh man, there isn't any silicone in there. There isn't any cotton in there. There's nothing sealing it. It's not a huge problem. So back to this. So take a look at this. You can see how the silicone has been pushed in only a little bit. You see right there? That's how far in it went. And a little bit extra went in here. This isn't going to seal much at all, because even if that wood expands, think about this. If that wood expands and starts pinching on the side of this, what's going to happen is it's going to squeeze on this silicone until the thin parts start to pop out like that. Because there's nothing to squeeze it against. It's more like it's pushing something out. Versus the thicker part of it, once it starts squeezing, it'll go up against that and it'll actually create a seal. So that's why it's so important that you get it deep down inside of the wood. Now it looks like in this particular spot, it is actually in the wood fairly deep. So I'm gonna get a little pick and I'm just gonna kind of dig that out and we'll see how far down they managed to get that silicone in that spot. I'm just gonna take this little tool. So take a look at this. This is the only section from here to here that actually stayed down inside of the wood. And you can see what I'm talking about. Look at the difference in depth. You have this much here, and you have this much here. Look at the difference there. And this is the one that held. So as long as you're getting, I'd say, this at the minimum, this thickness, you're gonna have really good adhesion to the wood. So when it does start to shrink or swell up, depending on how often this boat is sitting in the water, it's really going to make sure that this is adhering to the wood and causing it to stay sealed in the future. So let's take a look here at this silicone and see what kind of depth we're looking at. You can see most of this just wants to pull up. And again, you see how thin that is? Now we're not sponsored by Milwaukee, but every tool we use is one of these. I absolutely love this little sander. You can take it everywhere. You don't have to worry about cords getting caught up in anything. I'm sure other brands make just as good products, but for our shop, we are all red here. So I got it all sanded. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did I just sand this entire piece of wood when all the little bits and little screws are right along the edge? Well, they're not. And this is factory, believe it or not. This is a factory screw head. The reason we can tell is because it's a flat blade, flat top brass screw versus the Robertson, or as our friends in the States call it, square drive, that Canadians would typically use when they restore these boats. It's in fact just a little flathead. Now, it's important I sanded this because now I can see there's another one right there. Knowing there's one over here, there's possibly one here as well, and I can see the indentation of the two here. So now I know where to focus my efforts into. The scraper is great, but it's not going to get through these layers of paint, and sometimes they are a little bit deceiving. And the most frustrating thing is when you go to take one of these panels off and there's just one more screw holding it down. And it's right in the middle and you're pulling over here and you're pulling over here and it's not coming up. Just taking your time and using a sander instead of just scraping and going for it can really save you a lot of time in the future. That's what we're going to do now, is start drilling out all of these little plugs and taking out the fasteners as well. And yeah, on we go. Okay, let's see if I'm right about there being a fastener right here. Aha! See? And I bet you there's another one right here. Now here's the tricky part. I don't know how many of these are flat drive and how many of them are Robertson head. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. You can tell when I was drilling out the plugs for this, I don't really know yet. So I'm going to have to take a little scraper and just kind of go at it and clean that up and see if I can identify it. Some of these are going to be completely different than the rest. So it's always good to make sure you got a nice selection of bits that you can use to take this all apart. Look at that. That's the original fastener, and there is a chunk of it missing down deep inside of the frame. So you're gonna have some surprises when you install the new piece. Now how these work is you have your battens running up along here. So each strip of screws like this is going to have a batten running up along it. You're also going to have them running this way, and that's where these come in play. So the problem that surfaces when you put a new bottom on these boats, a lot of these are going to be broken off. Not all of them, but most of them will be broken off. And when that happens and you go to put the new bottom onto it, there is always the possibility you're going to hit one of those with a screw, because you're essentially going in a very thin area. It's only this wide. So if you get them lined up just how they were, there's a very high chance you'll hit the old ones. So try your best to remove any little pieces that you see sticking up. If you just see them sticking up a little bit, get some pliers or something and try to get them out. It's just good practice, because again, it's going to cause you a little bit of a headache in the future, and you'll end up breaking off more trying to fasten the new ones in. So tucked away on one of our shelves, we have a selection of hard to find hardware, just in case I needed one of these and I couldn't find it. And going out of our way to order some can be quite expensive if you do find them, because they want to buy them in bulk. So saving every one of these little screws, these little fasteners, is quite fortuitous. It helps you out in the future. I mean, there's lots of interesting hardware. If we notice a particular type of hardware that's quite difficult to get, we'll grab extras and hold on to them. Not a lot, but a couple of boxes. And that can be all sorts of different types of hardware. Now, this is very similar to one that I just showed you being pulled out of the boat, but the difference is that it's Robertson or square drive versus the flathead style. So if you're doing it show boat quality and you really want to make sure you got the right screw in there, it's really important that you hang on to as many of these screws and fasteners as possible, just in case you ever come across the fact that you might need one or two of these in the future. So we have all sorts of different little pieces of hardware tucked away from previous builds, extras from old builds. Yeah, always good to hang on to the old takeoffs. And now going back to my point from earlier, here's that flathead, and right beside it is a Robertson. So there's going to be a lot of bit changing in the drill, but just keeps you on your toes. You never really know which one you're going to find, so just be prepared for that. Well, this screw is spinning. Not something to be super concerned with. Once the wood is ready to be pulled out, we can kind of just move that out with the piece of wood. there's no point in going in here and trying to dig this out right now, so we'll just keep on moving forward. So it looks like I forgot one right here. For the most part, they're gonna be symmetrical, so you should have them all lined up somewhat like this. They're not always perfect, but if you notice that there's 2 in the middle, always look for 2 in the middle as you go down. It's gonna be different for every boat. I'm not saying every boat has 2 in the middle, I'm just saying for this boat, for this plank, that's what I've noticed, is there's 2, 2, and 2. So always keep your eye out for the little patterns. It can help you find hardware that's possibly hiding. For example, just now as I'm talking, I can notice that I probably forgot another set here, because once again, you look at the spacing, there's a good chance that there's some in between these empty spots. So I'm gonna go and just take a look there as well. So it looks like my guess was correct for this one and this one, but not correct for here. Again, I'm not super concerned about the condition of these panels, so if I think there's gonna be one there, I'm gonna go for it. I was wrong this time. You can see I hit the mahogany, but you never know. Sometimes, for the most part, it should be relatively the same, but you can see the differences in sizing here. Big differences in spacing, big differences in where they are. We like to make sure that it's nice and straight and it goes and looks beautiful on the boat, but relatively it should always be sort of similar patterns. So right here you have a little zigzag pattern, so I know right here there should also be a little zigzag pattern going across, and it should be like that all the ways along the outside. So we've gotten most of the planks off now at this point on this side, but I just want to take a little break on removing these and talk about the plywood part of this. Again, the intent of these videos is I want to show you guys how you can do these repairs yourself. So typically we're going to be taking the easier way of doing something rather than the more convoluted way in this series, just to teach you guys what exactly the process is. This shepherd, we're more than likely going to be doing it the very convoluted, complicated way. So stay tuned for that series to come up eventually. But for this one, I'm going to be showing you guys how you can just do it at home in your garage. Now, how we would do this in our shop if we were to do it the intricate way, and what I'm referring to is removing the plywood from the battens on this boat, is we would actually, and this just for the sake of argument, this is not going to be accurate, but we would actually mark out where the battens are on this piece of plywood. Again, this isn't accurate, this is just for visual representation, but we would mark out where exactly the battens underneath the plywood here are going to be running to along the plywood section. Once we have that information, we would then drill a hole and put a router in here with a bearing on the end of it so it can run along the batten edge, and we would take that along here and make little square or trapezoid, whatever shape it is, holes in the plywood, leaving just the battens with the pieces of plywood on top of it. Now the reason we would have to do it that way is this plywood is marine mahogany plywood. When it's been adhered to these battens, it's very, very difficult to pry this up and off of here, because not only has it been fastened down, it's also essentially glued down. You have two choices. You can either go the very convoluted route of finding out where each one of these is, marking it out, taking your router and making those holes, and then chiseling and scraping it off the batten. Or you can go the easier, well, it's not easy, but the easier route of slowly just ripping this to shreds. Again, I'm trying to show you guys what it would be like if you were to do this at home. So I'm gonna go the route of slowly ripping this to shreds as carefully as I possibly can. And then, like I said, on future videos, we'll show you guys the proper techniques that we use, but this is just so that you have an idea of what you're gonna get into if you were to attempt this yourself. Something interesting to note about this marine plywood, this mahogany type, is that it's probably an older piece. And the reason I say that is you can actually see here, there is some nails holding this onto the boat. So it's entirely possible that this was done in two separate layers. So you had the first layer put on, then they would have put the adhesive on it, and then they would put the second layer on top of that. And because of that, like I said, you have these copper nails in here holding down this piece. So I'm gonna see if I can get all of these out as well and continue ripping this off of the boat. So it appears that because of the age of this one, it's not done in the conventional way that we would do it. And it was actually just these nails held down along the second layer of the veneer on this plywood. So it's not exactly the way I thought it would be, but regardless, we still have to unfortunately remove it in this manner just to get it all apart. And it doesn't particularly matter too much if we start losing a little bit of this reference, because we're going to be fitting the plywood to the boat. I don't want to necessarily go off of this piece and have it be the wrong size, because this wood has begun to deteriorate in certain areas. So all that really matters is we're keeping these edges in good shape, and we're trying to preserve these as much as possible as well. So we got the plywood pulled off now, and I'll show you guys what the condition is. So as you can see, this edge is still nice and straight. We'll get all this cleaned out, but you can see all of these little nails that were in between that layer of plywood. They are littered all over the place. So we're gonna get all of those out, remove all of that. And then one thing we did notice too, this is always good to check in boats that haven't had a bottom done in quite some time. Go around and look for dry rot. You can take one of these, just see what you can find. Upon our visual inspection, I noticed that this batten here has a crack in it. It's got a flat head, so this is an original piece on here. And then this one has Robertson. It's actually dry rotted and cracking due to the fact that there's some oil that's gotten into this. It probably came from that steering gear down there. I don't know if you can see all the oil all over it. And in the past, it looks like someone has cut here and put in this piece in replacement. And I know that for sure, because if you look right here, that is actually also a flathead. So up to around this point, they would have cut this, put in a new piece, and fastened it down, likely for the same reason. This thing's probably been leaking forever. So what we're gonna do, is due to the fact that, you know, it's cracking and dry rotting. We're just gonna make sure we get rid of that. Now, following the boat back, we still don't know all the information about the rest of it, but I can already tell you that we are gonna be replacing a couple of other pieces. If you take a look here, that's what we mean when we say the word dry rot. So there isn't any water intrusion per se. It's mostly the fact that oil has gotten into the wood and it's no longer able to stay together in one piece. So you can, wow, that's really rotting right here. You see what I'm talking about in this part. So it looks like a piece of wood, but in reality it is not. So more than likely, these battens at the very minimum will have to be changed. We'll have to probably replicate a piece for this too. And I'll show you guys the process of us doing all of that. Again, the next steps are going to be, once we get this off, cleaning it all up, seeing what we have to replace, and going from there. Now, taking a look at the rest of the boat so far, what we have, it looks like dry rot, but it's holding up. That's just a screw hole. So it's always good to just kind of go around and double check, because sometimes it'll look rotting, sometimes it won't, and you don't really know until you start poking at it. So that's going to pretty much do it for this video today, guys. We're going to get the rest of the bottom off of camera. I don't want to sit here and have a whole bunch of footage of us just removing screws and nails the whole time. I'll probably record this piece of plywood as well, just for that crunching sound it makes. It's kind of entertaining, I think. But as for the rest of it, we're going to be showing the next video, more than likely, how we're going to be doing the battens. So hopefully by that time we'll have all of these planks removed and everything cleaned up. I've made quite a mess under here, so I'm about to get the broom and start cleaning up. That's as far as we're going to be stripping it down, minus, you know, removing some battens. And that's really all that there is to it. So stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you guys around.